So let's do a quick video of the nGauge because it's got some very neat features that I have only barely begun to scratch the surface of. You don't have to start the car to use it. As long as you have enough power, it'll crank up. But it's very hot in Texas right now, so we're gonna start the engine just so I can have some air conditioning while we're doing this. You can set the startup procedure to be based on alternator, which is how I have it set now. So if it sees enough voltage, it'll just turn itself on automatically. You can have it where you have to actually touch the gauge to turn it on if you don't want it to turn on by itself. It's got a couple of different options there. As well as on startup, you can choose what screen it's going to go to on startup. I have it set to immediately go to gauges. There are a few different settings on the gauges themselves that you can go through. I'll point out a few of those to you. And then for each one of them, there's pretty much infinite customization. So for right now, hopefully you can read this, I have it set to engine oil pressure, E85 content, intake air temperature, which I realize is high, but I've been sitting here just idling the car, playing with this in the garage, and so with the garage door open, obviously, but there's been very little fresh air moving through the engine compartments, so the intake temps are a little high, but that's fine. We're just sitting here. And then engine coolant temperature. So just to give you an idea of how easy this is to configure, you really almost don't even need an owner's manual. So let's say that I did not want oil pressure. All you do is click on the gauge that you want to change. You can see you have signal and display. We're going to come back to display in a minute. But if you just choose signal, it gives you options that you can scroll through: engine oil pressure, engine oil temperature, equivalence ratio, estimated engine oil temperature, IAT air temperature. For this particular model, we're in a 2014 SS Sedan. There were 102 OBD sensor readings that it was able to pick up, and for any of those, we could display on the gauge. So for right now, I want to go back to engine oil pressure. Right there. And as you can see, the gauges start as just this gray color. You can choose to make them colors for different readings. So let's go into engine oil pressure, for example, and then we're going to do display. Now for display, first of all, you can choose the name. I'm fine with EOPR, I know what that means. Units, if you want decimal places. And then here's where you can set your low warnings. So first of all, 0 is a low pressure warning. Doesn't really work for me. So let's just, for the heck of it, come in and set it at 20. So now at 20 PSI, that's a low warning. The high warning, 148, seems a little high. We're gonna come in and set it at 70. For an LS motor, 70 should be a pretty good high warning. Now what you can do is, for the normal color, we're gonna leave it gray. For the low color, I want it to go red, because if it's below 20 PSI when the motor's running, I definitely want to know that. And then for the high warning, oh, sorry, we went back into where we were editing it. We're gonna go down to the color. For the high color, we're gonna make that yellow. And you can see there's lots of different colors and options that you can do. So now it's gonna be gray when it's in the normal threshold, but if for some reason it goes above 70, it'll go red. You can see I already did that for the E85 content. For the E85 content, what I did was I set the low warning at 50. So if it's below E50, that's going to give me a low warning. And if it's above 70, that's going to give me a high warning. I know that might not make a lot of sense, but if you look at how I have my colors set up, the normal color, which would be below 50 and 70, will be yellow. If it's below 50, that's going to be red. And if it's above 70, it's going to be green. And so what that means is, that because you're able to customize this as well as you are, the high color is not a warning per se. It's that, hey, everything's great. You're above E70, green. And so because you can customize this as much as you can, you're able to, configure these colors and make the gauge be real meaningful to you. Like I said, I have not even begun to scratch the surface on that. But let's say that 4 gauges is not enough for you. You can come in here and just by clicking any one of these, you can see it says 6-pack gauges. If we click that, now you have 6 gauges displayed, all with the same functionality where you can click any one of these 6 and change what the signal is, change how the display works, everything. And what is neat about that is the display works differently for the 6-pack than it does for the 4-pack. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, let's say that on the 6-pack, I don't want the E85 color to be green. Let's say I just wanted it gray like normal, okay? So now all the gauges in the 6-pack are green. But if I go back to the 4-pack, you can see the E85 is still green. So you have infinite choices here. And if you want the 4-pack to be displaying a certain set of colors for your monitoring versus the 6-pack to be displaying a different set of monitors, you can certainly do that. If we keep going through the gauge options here, you have just a very simple round gauge option, which you can set to RPM, you can set to fuel pressure. There's 2 gauges here that you can set independently of each other. I honestly haven't even messed with this. This is just how it came out of the box. It's doing engine oil pressure on top, and I think it's fuel pressure maybe on the bottom. But once again, if I wanted to change the engine oil pressure, I just tap that, I hit signal, and let's say I wanted to make it RPM. I change it to RPM, just that simple. And now it's displaying RPM as the large tack, and then obviously I could change the lower one to be whatever I wanted. Now you'll also see there are some LEDs up here at the top. Those work completely separate from the whatever gauge pack style that you're using. So if you come over to the LED gauge next, this is where you can set what function is being displayed there. So let's say that you wanted to make that engine RPM. You can set it to engine RPM, and it'll display the LEDs as engine RPM, completely separate from whatever 4-pack of gauges that you have. So in fact, we can even just do that so you can see how this works. So we'll come in here and set this to engine RPM, and you can see once you do that, it even puts some automatic default parameters here. You would have to go through and set these differently to get it to function properly, because right now you can see it's lighting up the red one because it's set to 8, because I had this for knock retard set up a little differently, but all you'd have to do is, if you want to change how these colors work, you can set the first LED to whatever you want. So if you want that to be 1,000, you'd set it to 1,000, and then you could set the second one, etc., and that way it'll light up the gauges however you want. Personally, I had it set up for knock retard just because I'd like to know if that's happening. We just went past that. Oop. There it is. And what I did was, I don't want this green light on all the time just to let me know there's 0 knock retard. So all I did is set the first one to 1. And so if there's 0 knock retard, none of the lights come on. If there's 1, the first light's going to come on, etc. Obviously, we can, go through and fine tune that. If you want the second one to be 2, 3, 4, you can set that however you want. And then you can return back to the quad gauges. And as I was saying, even though we're sitting here viewing the quad gauges, these LEDs will light up dependent on the settings that were in that previous option. So other than just being a really badass gauge, you also have, if we just click anywhere and we exit gauges, this is the main menu. We bypassed the main menu when I started this up because I wanted it to go directly to gauges. But if you wanted to do diagnostics, you can do that. You can come in here and data log. There's a USB drive card built in here that if you wanted to, pull this out and plug it in your laptop, you could. There's also a USB port here to do that. You can read codes, clear codes, vehicle info is just basic information about the car, crank relearn, etc. So you've got lots of cool options here for what to do. And then even in the settings, you can see there's options on how it sleeps and wakes. And like I said, I have it set to be based on voltage. And you can even set what those voltage thresholds are. So if you want it to come on at 13.5 volts instead of 13.4 volts, you could do that. Brightness, I haven't messed with. Once I drive this at night, we'll see if I want to turn that down. It doesn't appear that there's an auto brightness. It's just, low, medium, and high. And then you can see it's also flashing the LEDs, so that way you can see how bright those are going to be if you were to dim those. Units, obviously, you can mess with. Firmware updates are very, very quick and easy. You need to make sure that you update the firmware out of the box. When I got this, I plugged it in just to start playing with it, and the functionality was nowhere near what it was after I updated the firmware. All you do is download the firmware, put it on the SD card either by taking the SD card out of the nGauge and just putting the firmware file on there, or if you plug this into your computer, the entire gauge will operate as like an external flash drive device on your computer, so that way you can just copy and paste the firmware file over, and then you hit update from SD card right here, and it literally took 20 seconds, and boom, the file was updated. Other inputs, if you wanted to connect any kind of external, third-party box to this to pull other inputs into the gauge, it can handle that. You can see startup mode, I have gauges. Demo mode, obviously I wouldn't mess with. If for some reason you want to do a factory reset. And then tuning. This is not going to get us very far, but we can come in here, and if your tuner sends you the file, once again, you can throw it on the SD card or just plug this into your computer. You load the tune file onto this, and you load the tune, boom, it loads it onto the car, quick and easy. So you can also save the stock programming onto this, load it back to stock, everything right here from the gauge. You don't need a laptop to do any of that. Makes it very quick and easy, especially if you're on the go and you want to be able to maybe have a couple of different tunes on here. You can throw 2 or 3 tunes on the nGauge and switch back and forth between them, and just as quickly as it can load the tune on the car. I mean, it's not, it's not like, some of the tuners that, for other makes where it's instant. Obviously, you got to turn the car off and wait for the tune to load, but at least it's something that gives you a portability option for loading the tune on the car without needing a whole laptop or anything. And as you can see, I am using just a suction cup mount. I'll do another quick video here where I show how I ran this cable. Very simple, but that's about it. It's a really neat little gauge. It mounts here nicely, in the corner here of the A-pillar. Don't need to drill into the A-pillar. Don't need to worry about anything like that, or any kind of permanent, mounting, because it's on this nice little suction cup mount. If I want to take it out and put it in another car, I can. It's not some permanent installation, or if I go and I want to sell the car and take the gauge with me and put it in the next one, I can. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. All I did to mount it is simply plug in the OBD port. I came over and opened this side panel to pass the wires through and just ran it straight up, and then the cable comes out the top and then goes right back into the back of the gauge. And you can see there's a nice suction cup mount that's optional. I mean, if you wanted to get a A-pillar mount, you certainly could. I am fine with the suction cup mount that allows it to be easily removable. So even if I wanted to take this gauge and put it in another car, even for just data logging or to check codes, I could without having to remove it from an entire pillar. And this makes it very nice and easy to move. And you can see that with it all closed up, all you have is a nice little wire sticking out from the top of the side panel there, and then at the bottom the wire gets tucked right nice into the side panel from the OBD port.